Hi everyone from Giaco. After living over a decade in Finland, I decided to help building a bridge between the English-speaking people living in Finland and the local community. Listen to my podcast to discover the most interesting and incredible people from Finland and to dig into Finnish culture and controversial issues that impact all of us in our daily life. And now sit back and enjoy listening. Bye! Hi everyone. The following is a conversation with Maryan Abdulkarim. She's an activist against racism and inequality, and for her work she won the Finnish prize, Minna Cant. During our talk we touched on really important topics about Finland and how racism is present in a society that declares itself equal towards everyone. This chat was intense and raised problematic topics that are better to be discussed openly. Please enjoy. Hi Maryan.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Would you like to state who you are and
Sure.
what do you do, how you define yourself? So then we introduce.
All right. How would I introduce
Topic.
myself? In different situations, I introduce myself in different ways, but like for the purpose of this conversation, I'd probably say I'm Maryan Abdulkarim. I live in Helsinki. My mother tongue is Somali because, I was born to a wonderful Somali family way back, and I was raised in a Somali home. First part of my life in Somalia, and then later on here in Finland.
At what age did you move to Finland?
I was 7 when we left home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see if I ever get to go back. Haha. There have been offers, like every time I speak about Finnish men being violent or whatever, there's always someone, sending me messages saying you should go back and they should. I'm like, send me a ticket, man. Like I would never say no to a free ticket to go back. But they should be more clear about where they want me to go back. Sometimes it's Saudi, sometimes anywhere in Africa, sometimes they're not consistent in their desire to relocate me. But yeah, anyway, I don't really have a professional identity that I'm really stuck with. I feel like it's still developing. I do a lot of writing. I work around media, culture, and so on. And I'm currently working on my master's thesis for sociology.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
But you've been a columnist, you've been in TV programs.
I write columns, for Apulehti at the moment. I used to be in this morning TV show for a few years, but I haven't been, I stopped doing that a couple of years ago.
But I would define you as an activist, and then I think that the way your message goes through.
Maybe a recovering activist.
Okay, what is the difference?
I feel old and tired. I'm not out there, with signs and demonstrations.
Fighting,
the idea of going out to demonstrate feels exhausting.
Yeah.
Just the idea of it, and the things I would do when I was younger that I was you gotta fight and have to.
Yeah.
Now it's I think Hannah Gadsby said it really well, when she was in her stand-up routine. I think this was maybe in Nanette or Douglas, where she goes I identify as tired. I'm yeah, that's also my pronoun at the moment.
But your passion and the reason why you've been an activist and why you keep on writing and you keep on pushing the idea of equality still burns in you?
You're so poetic. I even when I started being on these platforms where I would discuss societal issues and structures and racism and gender equality and so on, it was never a planned thing. It was never I'm going to do this. It was more of I was the accidental activist, I would get involved in something and then that would lead to something and so on. But I think I felt maybe there wasn't options, being quiet wasn't an option because that's not how I was raised. But then also, because of who I am, there are a lot of spaces, a lot of situations where you feel you are being penalized for just being you, and that just doesn't make sense. And you're this is insane, what is happening? So trying to understand that and unpack that. And yeah, there's a part of me as a parent that's hoping, because my generation has been doing some things that the next generation won't have to deal with it. But like looking at Finland now, I'm like, damn, we're lucky if like, 3 generations from now, we can find one that doesn't have to deal with the same stuff we've been dealing with. So it's like,
From time
it's
to time,
frustrating. It's
yeah.
frustrating.
It seems that it's getting worse sometimes. And I'm on the same agenda because I feel what you're saying. And this podcast is about trying to make the next generation coming to have a different kind of reality.
Yeah,
Finnish
just to
reality.
be like regular people who can pursue their dreams and their potential without being like, judged by identity or things they have no, like, nobody chooses the body they're born into or the first languages they speak or what religion they're raised in or what is their
Family,
sexual identity or so on. Like the things we don't choose shouldn't be things that can be used against us,
Sure.
Like, and at the same time, they shouldn't be things we should feel shame or like we should be apologetic
Absolutely.
about. Like that doesn't make sense in my head. But when it comes to is racism getting worse, like I have maintained this position for a few years now. Like when perussuomalaiset had their moment of jutku, and the media was full of this, like, oh, the racism is getting worse. I was like, no, it's not getting worse. Like the idea that institutional racism is getting worse doesn't make sense to me. Because we live in a society that has been dealing with hierarchical structures for centuries.
Sure.
The Roma didn't get civic rights until 1969 when racial discrimination was put into law, when Finland signed the UN act saying that, racial discrimination is a crime.
Correct.
Until then, the Roma were treated like second-class citizens. Like they were pretty much in the same situation as the black people in the U.S., which is little known fact here. Up until like late 60s, the Roma didn't have the right to rent houses long-term, which meant they couldn't put their kids to school.
Yeah.
The Jewish community in Finland, early, like, before the Second World War, before Finland became nation-state Finland, they were undocumented, a lot of them. Like, the Jews were not allowed citizenship. It came later.
And that is what is a structural racism
Yeah,
about.
so when you say racism is getting worse, it's like, no, there are some things like that have been part of the society, part of the fabric, that there was like this short moment maybe, like the 80s, I don't know, the 90s was quite bad, where maybe it was not okay to say everything people were thinking. So when the basic Finns had their moment of jutku or whatever, and they politicized racism, they created an atmosphere where people felt more entitled to say what they thought. Nobody became racist.
So
Nobody changed their opinions. Like, for me, it's hard to accept that a human being who was raised in this society, who was educated here, would one day wake up and say, like, oh, today I'm racist. There has to be something already, some idea in your head, in your mind, something that you were raised with when it comes to other human beings and their human worth. Like, how do you value humanity? What do you consider normal, or what do you consider less than you?
I understand. It's a deep thought, but don't you think that giving platform and allowing certain kind of speech will engage people in more of it and feed more thoughts that are towards a certain kind of ideology? I understand your point.
But like, for example, if you are now like, you're a white guy, right?
Yeah.
So if someone gives you a convincing speech about how I am less than you and the culture I represent is less than you, like, is that all it would take for you to start seeing me as less than you? Or do you have your own value system already in you that would allow you to say like, hey, actually, no. Like, there has to be something already there. There has to be a seed for you to be able to kind of like say out loud. And I think, yeah, of course, it's terrible when you have media or like, social media on the streets, this like more racist ideas presented.
Yes.
It feels terrible for people who are subjected, like the people who are racialized. But at the same time, I feel like we can only change what we can see. Like if people are shamed into not saying out loud how they really think and feel, how are we supposed to have this dialogue and conversation about the values and the ideologies that inform each one of us? So in a way, I feel like for me personally, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but for me, I prefer that it's out in the open rather than it's hidden.
So it can be discussed and addressed.
Yeah, because if someone is like, oh, I agree with you, yes, we're all equal, that doesn't give you a lot of room to discuss. You know? Even if they hate your guts, if they're saying like, oh, I cannot say now that I don't like you, I think like, you should not be here.
Yeah.
So I feel like when things are out in the open, it makes it easier to have these conversations, however painful they are.
Yes, also because certain thoughts, if they are open in the open, they can be challenged and they can be discussed in a constructive way, and you can show to people how flawed the thought are. So I totally understand, but you for sure know that there is this terminology that came like deplatforming, so taking people out of platforms. And what is your thought about it? You already said it, it's better to speak, but I've heard many people, especially talking about racism, about some people go as long as discussing Hitler and certain topics and Holocaust, certain topics that are quite important. And I've heard that it's from some people that it's much better to deplatform person that have hate speech or talk about matters that they are even factually wrong, because the impact that they can have on people, it's much more difficult to convert it back and go and clean what mess they've done. It's so much work that it's rather better to take them away and mute them. It's totally against what you just said, that I understand. But
do we have any examples of a successful deplatforming? Like, I would really be curious to hear. As far as I know, since, for example, Me Too, no one has been cancelled.
Well, Twitter has been found guilty of cancelling people and closing accounts here and there.
But it's usually activists. It's usually people who are trying to actually change things. So if the people who are being silenced are those who are in minority positions, then the discussion of deplatforming or canceling sounds ridiculous, because like the people who most want to talk about cancel culture are white or like quite privileged. And I'm like, but who has been canceled? Like, give me one case in Finland that someone in a position of power who has abused their power has been cancelled.
No, that I don't know, but
or even deplatformed. Like the guy who was questioning the Holocaust or calling it holohöle is now chairing our parliament.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for us to discuss in a meaningful way about the potential of deplatforming, I would need an example of where it has actually happened and has been of use. For example, we can say historically, if you look at the Second World War, when the Allied forces got rid of the Nazis, when Hitler, he killed himself, but like in a way he deplatformed himself, right? Like he was silenced for good.
Yeah.
The Nazi ideology did not die with him.
No.
The idea that the Jewish people are less than did not die with him. A lot of them had to flee Europe even after the war was won. They had to flee Europe as refugees.
Yeah.
Europe that was free of the main bad guy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean,
I understand you don't eradicate the idea, deplatforming.
I mean, if I see that there is a case where it has actually worked, then definitely I would be all for it. But I haven't seen that, so I'd be very cautious in because I love freedom of speech, and I think it's fundamental. And I would not want to live in a society where freedom of speech is restricted. And I would rather tolerate negative speech than restrict free speech. Like free speech is really for me it's very fundamental.
Yeah.
Like So I defend free speech. And I think we should defend it even when the speech is not something we align ourselves with. And when it comes to racism, the problem often is if someone says something racist, and I, for example, challenge them and I say, hey, that's messed up. They will cry, oh, you're trying to cancel us. And I'm like, actually, no.
Yeah.
You are exercising your freedom of speech. I'm not saying you shouldn't speak. I am commenting on the content of your speech, which is still within. Yeah. So we need to have more conversations where we actually discuss what is free speech and how do you exercise it, and that if I disagree with you, it is not censorship. How can I censor something that's already been out there?
Yeah. I totally agree.
But this is often what activism gets accused of, oh, you're trying to censor people, oh, you're trying to silence people. And it's like, who am I trying to silence? You said something out in the open, in the public space, and I'm commenting on it in the same public space.
Yeah.
That is
with
discussion.
Right.
That is not censorship.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And a platform to talk about this problem is the most important because it allows a constructive and objective way of building up the conversation and addressing the problems. Now I will rewind what we are talking and go back still to when you were discussing and describing your life. You said that you were raised in a Somali family, and you moved here in Finland. How was your youth here when you came? Can you tell us what you experienced and how you felt moving into this country? What kind of experience did you get?
I had a happy childhood. My parents really made sure that we were cared for, and I used to play soccer growing up, football. There are a lot of things happening, but as a child, I didn't have the tools to analyze what was going on. It was only as an adult that I was like, some of the teachers were pretty racist and sexist and whatnot. But when it was happening, I wasn't viewing the situations. Yeah, we had a small library near where I grew up, and I would spend a lot of time there, and the adults there were wonderful, which is why I still to this day absolutely love libraries. I think libraries are national treasures that we should protect at all costs. It became kind of second home. I would spend so much time there that they would ask me sometimes to step on the other side of the counter and, take, when people were returning books, that I could take them to the shelves, and I was like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of good in my childhood. I can't really say that it was this or that because I was not reading the news. I was not following the conversation that was happening around Somalis at the time. Now, if I go to this Elävä Arkisto or look into media archives from the 90s, it was horrible. The conversations that were happening, but we were protected from it. So I can't really speak to that. Say the 90s was this or that. In that sense.
I read you were writing about the fact that still being from a different, that you felt when you were going back from summer holidays, and you were explaining, and the teacher were asking how did you spend your summer, and you were saying, you were writing the fact that you felt ashamed of the fact that you were coming from a poor society, and then you connected the same topic to the possibility to access services.
That was more of a class issue than race issue. I was back home we were middle class or upper middle class, and here as asylum seekers, refugees, you become kind of lower class, and finances are not the same. But because of the way how my parents would organize our summer holidays and stuff, we were playing football, we were having a lot of fun. So for me, it wasn't personally a tragedy how I spent my summer. But then there would be these conversations in the classroom, who went to Tenerife or who went there and who did this and who did that. And somehow it would be values inserted in how you spent your summer holiday that was foreign to me. But then you get assimilated into that kind of thinking where you feel oh, I don't want to say what I was doing because, you're going to be oh, poor you.
It's less cool than
Yeah. But I think my idea with that column was children who grow up in different families, because we have studies that show that there are, in Finland, a wealthy welfare country, Finland, we have kids who go to bed hungry.
Yeah.
Child poverty is at the rise again. And this is because the income of the families is not what it used to be, and the society apparently takes less interest or whatever. And it's not only that you grow up not having the same possibilities to hobbies and like, figuring out what you want to do and like being exposed to different things.
Services also.
Yeah, but it's also like during the holidays, if you live in an apartment building, for example, and you have parents who are working low-income jobs, you spend a lot of time on your own or like on the TV or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's a shame. I mean, because the society should be able to provide things for the kids, and it's like it's a very complicated issue. Like it's a super complicated issue, how kids grow up from a very young age to very different realities based on the income of the parents, and like and it's not always a choice. Like I don't think any parent chooses like I'm gonna be poor and I'm gonna raise kids in extreme poverty. Like my kids might. I want them to feel hunger. Like so they know. Like I don't think that's anyone's plan. Things happen that we don't plan on.
But that's really good to raise the fact that even though everyone is aware that there are services that are available, still the way to access these services and the possibilities are restricted, and they are connected to what is the income of the family. And it is something that probably at certain level of the classes of the society, the problem is not even seen, because they think like, okay, there is all the summer activities, they can go here and there, they can, but still they cost money and time, even if they are connected to church or other associations. You still have.
Yeah, I mean, I would love it if we lived in a society where every and all hobbies were for free. Like kids could try anything they want, and parents wouldn't worry about if they can afford it. Because like, if you grow up in a household where your parents have resources for you to try out hockey or pick up the violin or have dance classes, and if you grow up in a house where none of these are possible, it's very different.
Yeah,
like the potential is very different. What your dreams are very different. And we talk about the equality of possibilities, but they're not equal. If already as a child,
true,
you are like what your possibilities are so deeply connected to what the resources available to your parents are.
Yeah, but absolutely. But the Finnish school was based and thought to help equalize the differences. But regardless,
that was Kugenau's and Snellman's idea, equality, that bring all the kids to the school and from different classes. Of course, the Roma were not in this ideal, but yeah.
But we have to give anyway, of course, to Finland a high five for how the system has tried to build and is trying to improve towards equality. And it's a discourse that it is.
On paper, Finland is perfect. On paper, Finland is the ideal country.
Yeah.
On paper.
But in reality.
In practice, unfortunately not. I mean, there are a lot of good people doing a lot of work to make sure and so on, but there are differences, I mean, based on where you grow up, what area you live in, what school you go to, who are the teachers. Like, there are too many factors that can either work for you or against you.
Do you think this is ingrained, it's part of just how a society is built? Or is it because Finland is not doing enough? Because then these differences of inequality, they are present in all the societies we know.
But isn't equality a key component in capitalist societies? Like, to a certain level, capitalism needs inequality. So there are those who have and those who don't have. And you have, people who are willing to do cheap labor, and then those who can build the companies. So like certain idea of inequality, could we have capitalism if everybody had everything they need? If no one would have to do minimum paid, like minimum wage jobs,
Yeah.
So I'm not an economist, so I don't understand everything. But I'm just saying, like, there are some things that, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a very complicated question that I'm maybe not equipped to answer right now. Like, I do see the good in Finland. And I think we have a lot of amazing norms in the society that we should be very proud of and try to hang on to. But then there are also harmful norms, and there are things that are harming especially young people and kids that we should try to find solutions for.
And your activism work was intended to bring these topics to the crowd and to talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if they give me a platform, I will say what I think on the things that I have opinions on or like I have experience on.
I thought when I was inviting you, I thought, and this is a question now, open question, this braveness that you have, and you were talking this, that like you want to talk about the problems, and when you were an activist, you had this power and this burning flame that like you want to get these things shown and you want to talk about this. Is this something where you have been raised up by your family, or is it something that came through some bad experiences, or the reality you started to see when you were bigger and you noticed the differences and you felt that you were mistreated?
You are very poetic again in your description of my past. But I would say for me, it was like I said, I was the accidental activist. And it was like, if not me, then who? Like I found myself in situations where I was asked to comment on something or, write something. And I'm not really the type to write about like cat litter and the differences, although that would be a goal someday, that I would live in a world where I would just compare different cat litter, like cat sands, and like how are they different and why does it matter, and like why do we have so wide varieties in pet stores and stuff. But we're not there yet. And if I'm going to write something that is intended for people to read, I try to be mindful not to waste people's time, and that, it would be nice to just talk about the good things, but I want to believe that people know already the good things that are happening in their lives. And I think it's really terrible if people take away from my writings that I'm just seeing everything in a very negative way. It's not that. But like if you have one-page space once a month or like a 15-minute slot here and there, it's not really enough to
make a dent.
To like discuss first everything that is really good and give compliments to everyone that you think are doing a great job, but you want to be like, but this is hurting people and we should really fix it,
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I mean, of course, my upbringing has everything to do with it. Like, we were raised to do the right thing. We were raised to defend the weaker. We were raised to be like, carry ourselves and our identity in a very responsible way. Like my parents, they raised us right in so many ways. And I'm really grateful to them of how they made us understand ourselves and where we come from and be very secure in our identity. So that's something that that is really, really valuable in this society that sometimes maybe questions too much who you are and if you're worth anything and so on. But yeah, like I said, it was never my goal to be an activist. And at times I have resented the term activist because like saying that I'm a human being as a Black woman, being labeled as an activist is like, it feels wrong. And if I want to discuss my history or the history of my people, that's activism. But then someone who's white my age, they study about their history. It's school curriculum,
Yeah,
So
I understand, yeah.
So it's like, why is things related to my past activism, but things related to someone else's past?
It's just lecturing.
Yeah, something I should also know. And I love history, so I will read all the history books that I can get my hands on. But yeah, so that's been my kind of like resentment with the word activism, that it tends to put me in a box that my humanity is somehow something that you separately need to defend or like. I'm like, no, I'm not better than anyone, but I'm also not worse than anyone.
Probably I would define an activist as a person that tries to or underlines problems of the society and tries to change them actively. It seems you're giving it some sort of a negative connotation.
No. Like I'm talking about my relationship with the term, not everybody's.
Okay. Yeah.
No. Like I am careful not to say like, let me speak on behalf of everyone who's ever like, no. But like you're also doing this and you want to address certain things. So what is behind it? Like, would you identify yourself as an activist?
I'm actively trying to change things, yes.
But would you call yourself an activist?
Yeah, in that sense, yes.
So you have a different relationship with the term than I do, and it's fine. Like it doesn't take away from your relationship with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It depends, of course, how vocal the person is, and you were saying that you're not going anymore with signs.
But that's because I'm tired. I'm old and tired. It's
the retired activist.
Yeah, but also I'm really happy to see that like back, this wasn't even that long ago. It was like 2013, 2012, 2013 when I started participating more in these conversations and activism and so on. And in this last decade, there's like back then there were like me and Warda maybe, like people that I knew that were trying to engage with these questions that were black and female. Warda Ahmed, who's an amazing teacher and comic artist. But now we have so many voices. There are so many people from different backgrounds, like anything and everything you can imagine. So there's also this feeling that, I can maybe be tired because now the situation is not that, if not you, then who?
Yeah.
Like I have faith and trust and I fully support people who are doing the work and I'm really proud of them. I'm really happy to be living at the same time with them. So it's maybe a bit different. Like I don't have to ignore my needs or my lack of energy,
No.
Because there was situations where a journalist would call me up and be like, hey, we need you to come to this conversation. I'll be like, I don't know if I'm the right person. They would be like, if you don't come, we have no one else. And if the journalist is interviewing this person, they cannot challenge them. So we need someone to come in. I was stupid because if I known better back then, I would have been like, what are you talking about? Your whole, like, as a journalist, of course you're supposed to be challenging them. But then I would go, and have this conversation. And often, like, the people they would put me up against were people who didn't see me as a human being. They would be people who are, like, they wouldn't call themselves fascist, but they, like, ideologically, the ideas that they would adhere to were in conflict with my existence. But I would be like, I wasn't doing these conversations to change their minds, to say, like, I need you to, like, no, I didn't need anything from them. But my idea was I will go and I will have this debate with them. Yeah. So people who identify with me can see, that we can also defend ourselves. Yeah. And, if you're a young person, because there was a time I didn't have the language or the tools to talk about my experiences. So I'm like, if I can give that to someone, then definitely. So
you're a role model. Not
a role model. No, that's too. No, that's no. Role model carries a lot of weight, and it's something that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But I would say that, in a way, I feel like I'm a part of a community of actually several communities, and the best way communities function and work is that each one teach one. Like we can learn from one another, and we can, So sharing what I had to learn the hard way is not me being a role model. It's just, public service. It's just, hey, I picked up this tip. Maybe you can use it in the next time someone is trying to problematize your identity. Yeah.
Every time that I try to kind of give you also some sort of a credit, because anyway, I think that's a credit to give to someone, because you have stirred in other people anyway emotions, and you help them to feel belonging to you, to your cause, and give them power inside to feel entitled to just be and live and speak. You always try to dodge, and you want
dodging.
To be part.
No. I appreciate. You're being very kind and, like I said, very poetic. I don't know if that's the Italian in you. And I'm not like, this is not me trying to be humble or anything. That's not what's happening here. Like, I have enough confidence in me that I can, blow my own horn when I feel the need for it. But what I'm trying to explain here, when it comes to these hierarchies that we're dealing with and these frictions in the society, I lean on a community. I lean on my communities. And I feel like I was fortunate enough to have the support that I needed, to have people in my life that I can lean on. And that creates the sense of responsibility that I also need to pass it on what I can. So that's what I'm trying to explain here, not to say like, no. And the role model thing is like, it just feels really heavy. Like, it feels like if you're a role model, you can, like, I'm very much human. Like, my kids will be the first ones to tell you that, I have a terrible sense of humor. I make mistakes. I fumble. I'm like, so when you say someone is a role model, like, my role models are dead because dead people cannot disappoint you,
I understand.
So,
It comes with that word comes some kind of idolization of the person and some responsibilities that are connected to the perspective that other people have over you.
And in a way, that's also something that doesn't allow you to be fully human. Because when you're expected to be a certain way, it's like you divert from that even a little bit, and it's like, oh, no, I trusted you. Well, and it's like, I'm just having a coffee, but it's the wrong company, like, no, I don't need that kind of pressure. Like, no, I have teenagers living with me who are my worst critics sometimes, also love me very much, and I love them and everything, but
I understand.
yeah, so no, not a role model, but I do try, and like when I succeed in my attempts, it creates this like, like someone reaches out and like and I always get something back, like with the fascists that I have been talking with on live TV sometimes or radio, you don't really get anything from them. Like, you will have the conversation, like going into it. I know I'm not going to change their minds, but someone who's listening to that or watching it will reach out and say like, hey, actually you said this point and it's like something I can use when I have to be in a situation where someone is like, being racist or whatever. So that's great. And a lot of the times the people who reach out to me, I learn from them, regardless of what their identity or age is. Like, when you have an interaction with someone, it enriches you. So it's not just one-way street that, I'm absolutely giving you, hey, here, let me get...
Top down.
Yeah, no. Yeah. And that's what's beautiful about community or like these different communities.
Yeah, that's part when you were during an interview talking about how to make changes. You mentioned 3 points. That one was important, it's information. And then you had this gentleness and then collaboration. So I can see that this is really strong in you. These 3 aspects came already out in this conversation without having to mention them. But I think that they are powerful points. And this collaboration, it's exactly what you are talking now. That's why you are part of a community rather than one isolated person that tries to steer the world. And you need collaborate. You are giving, and you need from them also.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we're trying to change society, who are we doing it for? So there has to be people you lean on who lean on you, and like there has to be people who hold you accountable. Yeah. And accountability is super important. Like, especially with people who are using like public platforms. I don't have power in sense that I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawmaker. I don't have a lot of like, resource, for example. I don't have a company. Yeah. But it is power in itself that you have platforms that you can write on, that you can publicly speak your mind. And there has to be accountability. Yeah, there has to be accountability on that too. There have to be people who will check you when you need to be checked. And that is the community often. It's the people who are sharing with you, who are engaging with you. And it's beautiful because a lot of times, like, there are certain people who will give you nice feedback regardless of what you say and where you say it. Oh, great. And I find it hard to trust those people. Like, if everything is always perfect, then it's like...
Something
like, even when there was this one incident where I managed to give a perfect example on live TV about hypocrisy. And as soon as when I was leaving, I was like, I knew I'd fucked up. Like, I knew. So I go on Twitter and I write it. I'm like, yeah, I managed to give an example of hypocrisy. My bad. Like, I'm sorry. But there are people defending me. And I'm like, what are you defending here? Like, even I know that I was wrong,
wrong. And you admit it.
Yeah, because it was like when people whose kind of like ideology I align with a bit more. Defending their right to demonstrate, and I don't care about what they're blocking. But then when they're like, you know, people who are of different ideology or whom I find even maybe like they were anti-vaccine or whatever.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, oh, but what about the kids going to school? And I'm like, you know, as soon as I said it, I was like, no, like either you support people's right to demonstrate, or you don't. You know,
throughout the range of everything.
So when I said that, it was like it was this like you couldn't script it. It was such a moment of like, okay, this is hypocrisy.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Here, that goes the point that people probably expect if you identify as a role model, they expect you to behave in a certain way, and they're almost giving you this kind of free pass that you will never make mistakes. You are perfect,
and nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, that was a good example of how this.
And nobody should be perfect. Like I think the idea that there can be perfect humans is in itself inhuman. Like that is not something we should strive for. Like the perfect body, the perfect mind, like no. It's like being a human is trial and error. It's imperfection. It's like.
My perspective on society, me being Italian, so I have a white privilege.
Italiano.
Sì. Yes. I have suffered a certain degree of inequality that is much lower than other different races. And my point of view when I see Finnish society, what I read and what I see, it's clear to me that there is the most powerful intents in anger, it's towards different skin colors, and especially against Somali. But do you agree or not?
I don't really like. I think Somalis are maybe the most visible minority. There's like this idea of dark black Africa, like, you know, violence or what have you, and then there's this idea about Islam.
Exactly.
And Somalis come with both these, you know? So it's like, it's not enough that you're black, you're also Muslim, you know? So I think that's something that is happening, but I don't think there is a hierarchy necessarily in racism, except, again, we come back to the Roma, because like, however racist society is when it comes to Somalis, for example, the Roma have it worse, which is something I struggle to understand. Like a Roma who is identified as a Roma going to the store will be followed. I will not. Like when I was younger, but now that I'm like, you know, this almost middle-aged mom, I can shop for groceries in peace. There are no guards following me. Yeah. There's no one saying like, you know, we won't give you service. There's no one checking if I have money to pay for my gas when I go to the gas station. It doesn't matter where in Finland I'm at. If I go to a restaurant in Helsinki, it's like I will be seated. But the Roma, they experience it in a very different way.
True.
And it's so internalized, this like racism against Roma. I find, because the Roma have a history of over 500 years in Finland. They speak Finnish, they're Christians,
that's true.
you know? But it's like, I would say it's normalized to marginalize them, to keep them at bay. Yeah. Like someone I went to school with once told me that when they were doing this part-time job at a store, they were told when they were starting the job that if a Roma comes, you have to alert a colleague. Like the only group that is singled out.
Yeah, it's a rule.
Yeah. So, I don't know, like,
that's
there's racism, but then there is like this really normalized way of treating the Roma people that even people who think themselves the good guys will fall into that trap. And I cannot figure out, like, why? Why is hate against the Roma so deep in the fabric of the society?
And that's something that I was going to ask about Somalia and history, because you already mentioned that you love history, and one of these 3 points that we mentioned was information, and sometimes, a lot of information is radicated into history, looking back. And something that I was trying to picture in my head and thinking like, surely, of course, I identify the fact that the skin color and religion, and that's why Somali are considered or seen probably as a bigger threat than a white man like me from Italy.
Yeah, definitely.
But do you see in the history of Finland, now you're saying that you're puzzled why Roman are seen in this way. Do you find something in the history of Finland why those people or Somali would be treated different and seen as a bigger threat?
That's a really broad question, and there might be people more equipped to answer it than me. I'm just, saying that I don't understand why it's so internalized and normalized, what's happening with the Roma. But it's not just Finland, it's all over Europe. Like, I would say that even in Italy, the Roma are worse off than anyone else.
Sure.
And it's like, did the European countries come together at some point and decide that this is a group of people that, even during the Second World War, Roma were being singled out and they were being they suffered a lot. But when we talk about the Holocaust, it's less known how many Roma were also killed by the Nazis.
Never mentioned, probably they're not
No,
even
it is
mentioned.
in some places and so on, but it's not as known. And
Exactly.
I don't know, it's just, yeah. But anti-blackness in Europe, I would say that goes back to when Europeans discovered places that already existed and found lands and found people that didn't need to be found. And, so
We go back to slavery and colony.
yeah, because the U.S. is a European project. Europeans did that and built different ideologies and systems and hierarchies that are still in place today.
Can you talk us through Somali's history of war, civil war?
No, I am not equipped to talk about that. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I can talk about how Italians were in Somalia back in the day and the horrible things I've heard they did, but that was probably your grandfather's generation.
Yeah. Because refugees are coming and have come from Somalia from really tremendous civil war. And that's something, a perspective that I think that it's interesting for the Finnish people to understand the condition. If we talk about information, so we talk about the fact that why people would. There is a lot of this. I don't know if you ever stumbled upon the discourse that people are coming here.
When it comes to asylum seekers and refugees, I don't think it matters what the conditions people are fleeing are.
Don't you think it helps to sympathize?
It's just some people will be no. Because when we saw what happened in Afghanistan, when the Taliban suddenly came back to force and they were doing horrible things, and Finland was okay, we need to help people and we need to give asylum to especially women who are fleeing that area. There were still people going no, why should we? So people whose position is that no one should come here for any reason, I don't think they will be affected by the knowledge that what is actually happening in the world in different places like Somalia or Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria, or now in the Middle East, since the situation. But yeah, I think that would be its own podcast sometime to discuss these different places and what is going on and who carries the responsibility and should people. Because at the moment, the asylum policies that we have in place, it's not as human as you would like it to be in a free democratic nation.
What do you think? I was having here Eugene Ufoka and from African Racism Association Against Racism, and he was talking about how he sees in the youth and in the youngs this need for equality, and he's really positive to the fact that Finland will move towards a better future because youngster and young generation, they have a totally different mindset. Do you see this in your interaction in the public, in social media? Do you see the shift happening in a change of generation?
I will admit that I find young people who are younger, like now I'm talking people in their 20s, in their 30s, they are smarter and have better sense of themselves and the world than I did, my generation did. Like definitely the younger generation is better than my generation. Like I will admit that. I also think that when we talk about young people who are like, involved with climate change questions or anti-racism or so on, it's not all young people, unfortunately. Like we also have young people who are leaning towards more incel culture, more, toxic communities who find certain political ideologies that are more to the right, more appealing than leftist. And I think as someone who lives in Helsinki and like I don't really engage that much in social media with people, like I will check TikToks and stuff, but like I'm not really having conversations there. But I would say that the stuff that I'm exposed to is maybe more in a place like Helsinki. And I have no idea what's going on with young people, for example, in Kajaani or somewhere else.
Yeah, I understand that.
And of course I want to be an optimist and say, the future looks better. But yeah, I don't know.
Of course, I think that the young generation, they have a broader perspective, and so they have information that most likely you also didn't have, and I didn't have, in that sense, and that's positive. But in what you said, I see this phenomenon of getting polarized. So it's instead of being somewhere in the middle, you get to the extreme. Why do you think this is happening? Of course, it's a really deep societal question. And that I think it's partly because everyone has a platform to speak, and there is so much hate. So you start to develop this kind of hate, I'm right.
Well, yeah, it's a very, I think it's almost impossible to answer the question. But one aspect that is relevant here is social media. And social media at the moment, it's very much fed by emotions. So you don't even have to hate anyone. But if you can create content that will get reactions, it will get more views, it will get more likes, it will get more shares. Whether people love it or hate it, they will share it. If the content doesn't
stir any emotion,
then it will not be as visible. And I think this is something that informs people. So some of the people who are putting out content that's very problematic are not necessarily even doing it out of hate. They're just doing it because they want to get likes, they want to get views, and it is rewarded.
Yeah, and then
it is rewarded. Like people will click it, people will share it, people will be like, look at it, So yeah, that's an aspect that has an impact, which is like not really giving the realistic. Like the actual truth, because I don't want to, it's impossible to say how many of the people who are pushing content on social media are actually doing it out of ideological reason. But when you see what is trending,
the top.
Yeah, and if you want to monetize on your social media, then you do want to create that content that will push people's emotions. So, but it's not necessarily the actual truth of how people feel, like the creators.
Yeah, I think that social media, it's a great, powerful tool, but sometimes the monetization of it and the way it works, it's built, the algorithm allows and favor this kind of extremism. Because, of course, people get noticed when they have something that is controversial. And controversial is normally to either one of the spectrum of the idea, extreme to one side.
Someone was saying that if you put a social media video about a date that you had and the date went really well, it won't necessarily get likes. But if you find the ick factor, I went on this date and then this happened and this was the ick factor, people will be like, oh, look. And then that creates this trend where people are actually going on date to create content, to get these stories, rather than actually meet people and just waiting for that moment. Like you'll say something wrong, or you will pull out a wallet that's really messed up or something, and then came the ick factor. So
true.
then it becomes like this kind of I used to play this Pokemon Go with my kids when it came out, and we were looking for Pokemon characters, all over Helsinki. And now it's like for social media, you're just searching for this, stories that you can share that will get people come to your platform and like, share your story and so on.
And you get your reward when you have people following.
And that, we live in a really, I think every generation thinks that they have lived in a very interesting time, but I think the times, they're very complex and I don't understand it all the time. I try to understand, but sometimes my brain just goes like, no work. Like, you try to make sense of things and it just doesn't make sense. It's like the math is not mathing. Like, what's happening here? Yeah.
What is your opinion of Finnish politics concerning True Finns, the perussuomalaiset, and they have been exposed by their own founders also to be becoming more racism and extremist? What you're raising your shoulders?
They are in the government, so I don't know. I mean, it's a political party.
Yes, that has a lot of influence.
Yes.
Do you think their agenda it's...
I would maybe at this point recommend to you and the listeners, there's this amazing book, I think it was by Maryan Abdulkarim. It's called The Dawn or the Dusk of Democracy. It's describing how political realities changed in places like Poland and was it maybe Hungary? Let me just check.
You can Google it, the correct name. It's interesting. You read it in English?
Yes. I'm just like, was it dawn or dusk? Maybe it was like dusk of democracy.
Yeah, it seems that it's talking about the end.
Yeah, it's Maryan Abdulkarim is the author. Well, in Finnish, it says Demokratian iltahämärä. And it's talking about Poland, where the author has spent time and followed the politics and what has happened. And reading that, it's like the basic Finns are reading the same playbook as...
What is the playbook?
I don't want to give the plot away, but it's like... Like these far-right parties that come to power legally and use democracy, and then once they have the power, once they have control of the institutions, push for more authoritarian societies. But I think now, wasn't it recently that Poland, there was an election and now they're going back to more democratic era, which is like really good for them.
So you think that that's what is happening, but the voters...
I don't know if that's what's happening, but like it's something that worries me. Like I really hope it's not.
That's worrying me too. That's why I raised it as a topic.
But you should have like political researcher here. Then we'd all be wiser for it. Like,
Yeah, I thought you had an opinion because anyway you...
Opinions are not same as facts, like I try to be careful with my opinions. I don't trust the basic Finns. Like I don't trust their politics. They worry me a lot. But I can't tell what the future will bring. I mean, it's possible they actually are able to commit to democracy and maintain democratic ways in this country. But there's the fear that they might be pushing for more authoritarian system.
Probably, of course, it's a really broad question that doesn't have a straight answer. But what would you do if you would have a magic wand? What would you do to change the situation at hand that we have, both political and...
If I had a magic wand, I would use it to create a world where weapons didn't exist.
Weapons?
Yeah. They would just disappear.
How so? Can you open
Like, I feel like building defenses and using a lot of resources on weapons, deterrence as they're called, takes the focus from more diplomatic ways of solving conflicts. Like, as humans, we should be evolved enough, we should be civilized enough to handle conflicts without murdering each other. And when weapons exist, there's always the temptation to use it. I mean, imagine Putin trying to invade Ukraine with no guns. Like, how would that look like? You know, he'd be like, no, now I'm coming. Like, but, you know, I don't know. But, like, it scares me how much weapons there are and how it's like we're in a point where the world seems to be preparing itself more for wars than peace. And there's this debate now because of comments made in the US by a presidential candidate that maybe Europeans should put more resources in arming themselves instead of looking to the US for support.
Yeah, that's Trump.
It's scary. It's very, very scary. Like, I don't know. I mean, we've had wars and so on, but like, have we learned nothing? And like, I know I sound really naive now saying like, you know, I would like to live in a world where there are no weapons, but...
No, but
But there have to be ways that countries can negotiate, people can negotiate peace and like resolve conflicts without killing so many people. It's just like so many people don't exist right now that existed a few years ago because of these wars that just keep happening. And people... And often it's not even the people who are starting the wars who are dying in them. It's like civilians or like, you know, young people who are in the armies or whatever. So it's insane.
It's in this we can see, for example, the American approach to the problem. That is like there will always be someone trying to hurt you. So you rather have the possibility to defend yourself, so you can carry guns until there are states that you can have automatic guns on you. And so that's kind of the one extreme way to address the problem. Get armed because someone will hurt you. And then anyway, and police, it's always like with the hand on the guns as soon as they stop someone. And then we come to Finland where police, for example, also works as a function of civil work, helping, providing support, talking. So we are addressing the same problem as violence and hate in the street with a more, I believe, a more developed way. Do you think that this could be taken forward?
Yeah,
because unfortunately, the truth is that war has been always fought. And Einstein was saying that I don't know which weapon will be used for the Third World War, but I can tell you that the fourth will be sticks. So that, of course, it's probably most likely true, but he was thinking that war will always happen, and there will be always a weapon at hand.
Yeah.
Of course, I think that conflict there will always be. So
no, conflict will always be. I mean, I'm not saying conflict won't happen. There's conflict where there are two people. Like, just being different from you, there is a conflict. But, like, it's up to us how we deal with that conflict, you know? Yeah. And we can
discuss.
And, like... But this is way too complicated. Like, I can't really solve this question. But if I had a magic wand, I would like a world that didn't have this, you know, mass killings and weapons and so on, that people would actually be forced to discuss and deal with their emotions. And
that would teach us a way also to address all other minor problems like we have in our society.
Yeah.
That was a powerful thought.
Thank you for the magic wand.
Thank you, Maryan. It has been really interesting, and I think you are humble, but you've done great work.
Grazie. Thank you very much. This was really thought-provoking.
Good. Have a nice day.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.